Hey all, welcome to week 15 of teacher training and advanced teacher training. And this week we are going to talk about sequencing. So in my original training for the 200 and the 500, I had something called the art of sequencing, and that is the 5 parts of every class. And a standard type of yoga class has the 5 basic parts. But then, in addition to that, I decided to do something that's very unique called 4-point system sequencing, which really takes your sequencing to an entirely different level. So essentially, anyone can put together a 5-part class, and that's kind of standard. But then what is it that makes your class an experience? What is it that makes people want to come back to your class specifically? What differentiates you from every other teacher? And so people over the years were asking me, what is it you do that makes people like your class so much? I can't pinpoint it. I don't understand. What is it that makes your class different from other people's classes? And I actually had to think about it a lot because it's something that I did naturally. It's something that I just have such a deep interest in what I do, and I love to study and find out as much as I possibly can about each and every pose and all of its different components and how I can put it into the class and what people will respond to and what they need. And so I would think about all of this, but it was very organic. And so then I thought, well, what am I doing? And I came up with 4-point system sequencing. Not because there's just 4 points, but because overall that really does take into account most of what I do. So I'm not a big category type of person. Like, I don't feel like everything fits into a specific category. Just like our poses, some poses are balancing poses, but they're also back bending, and they're chest opening, but they're also strength building. And so you get the point. Like, there's a lot of different things that go into this, and maybe this pose helps one person overcome fear while it builds confidence in another. So a lot is left up to interpretation. However, we can't deny that if something helps one person overcome fear, then that is an aspect of the pose. Or if it builds confidence, then that is an aspect of the pose. And, physically, we can't deny if something builds strength, but it might also open them up. It might make somebody more flexible as well. And so all of these different components and characteristics are in, let's just say, for example, a dancer's pose. But if we can organize it in our minds when we're putting together the sequencing, then rather than being all over the place when you teach, and when you finish teaching feeling like, did I even have a point? A theme is one thing, but as human beings, we tend to drift. We start off one way, and then you can get all the way to the end of the class and you'll be on a completely different topic. And although I love to let the mind wander here and there for fun and to see what I come up with, it is not fun to take someone's class that is disorganized. Okay, so this is going to help you put some framework around your class. So that being said, I'm going to go over the art of sequencing and then over the 4-point system sequencing. And what good is knowing any of this if we don't know how to apply it? Then we're going to do the sequence called Ice Cream Sunday, and I have put the 4 points to the sequence Ice Cream Sunday, which is about happiness in daily life. So let's get started with that. So here is the art of sequencing, how to build a beautiful and balanced asana class. All classes begin with a breathing exercise and end with shavasana and chanting and or a reading. So you don't necessarily have to do, some serious pranayama like is done in a Bikram class, or alternate nostril breathing or ujjayi breathing, but it is absolutely imperative that you start off with some breathing, attention to the breathing. Sitting down or taking active child's pose and bringing the attention and the focus to your breath. Okay? Parallel breathing is imperative, and telling them what parallel breathing is. So that has to happen at the beginning of the class, because truthfully, if you are not doing any kind of breath work at all, then you are not practicing yoga. So we need to bring that in right at the very beginning. Do people do it well? Not necessarily. It is something that, of course, takes a great deal of practice and a lot of emphasis. So once you also initiate something like we're doing parallel breathing, then you need to remind them throughout the class to reconnect with their breath, to remember that they're breathing parallel, to notice their breathing. So what you set them up for at the very beginning has to be carried out throughout the entire practice. And that goes for every single class that you will ever teach. So there's 5 parts to the body of every class. The warm-up, which includes the breathing, and then balance and endurance, strength building, deep work, and restoration. So the amount of time that's spent in each part, 5 minutes in the initial breathing and 5 minutes in shavasana. So those are the bookends of your class, where you start and where you end. Okay, a minimum of 5 minutes in shavasana, and really a maximum of 5 minutes in the initial breathing, because what you don't want, especially with beginners, is for them to get like bored or confused. So 5 minutes is plenty of time on the front end, and then 5 minutes plus up to about 15 minutes in shavasana is appropriate for a 90-minute class. The best way to think about that is for every 30 minutes of practice, you should take 5 minutes of shavasana. Okay, so a 90-minute class calls for 15 minutes of shavasana. So then you have 20 minutes of the warm-up, 15 minutes of balance and endurance, 10 minutes of strength building, 20 minutes of deep work, and 15 minutes of restoration. Okay, and so you can also flip out balance and endurance and strength building. You don't have to do the balance and endurance first. You can do the strength building first and then follow it with balance and endurance. It's up to you. Most of the time, got a call there. Most of the time, it's intermixed. So a lot of your strength building poses are balancing poses, etc. So that's really not an issue. Okay, but it's really the amount of time that you spend in each of these. After that, we are going to get a little bit more specific now about what does a warm-up entail. So the warm-up, sun salutations, or a series of poses to get good blood flow and oxygen to all parts of the body. Get the breath to flow evenly in and out through the nose. And a good mix of each category of pose in this section of the class is important, and I'll tell you what that means in just a second. Choose straightforward and awareness heightening poses. No advanced poses here. So a good mix of each category of pose means you want to have like your standing poses, your forward folds, your twists, your back bends, and inversions. And down dog is considered an inversion, so it fits perfectly into this section. If you look at any of the sequences that are prepackaged, if you will, the ones that are always the same, they will have a mix of all of these categories of poses every single time. The next section is balance and endurance. So standing and balancing poses, we focus on alignment. We introduce details and the concepts of focus and concentration. And notice that it says the concepts of focus and concentration, because when we're warming up, we're easing our way in, we're getting the body warm, we're connecting with the breath, we're basically coming into the present moment. And hopefully that happens in the warm-up. Once you get to balance and endurance, you can start focusing on a little bit more heightened awareness, if you will. Like alignment comes into play. So in the warm-up, don't start talking about how to align perfectly. They're not really with you yet. So start that in the balance and endurance, especially too because they need it. When you're standing on one foot, you need to focus a lot more. And then the concept of focus and concentration means we're going to start focusing, not you're in some sort of deep focus and concentration. All right. Create stillness in the body and start to quiet the mind. Okay. And then we're going to move into strength building. Strength building, we have to emphasize the breathing. We have to hold the poses for quite some time. We really reiterate the present moment awareness. Like in the very beginning of the class, you might say, come into the present moment. But now we're really inquiring, like, are you here? Are you with the present moment? Or is your mind somewhere else? Repeat important instructions. Balance the hard with the soft instruction to extend time in the pose and give adequate rest after these poses. All right. So when we get into this strength building and we emphasize the breathing and hold the poses for quite some time, this is why the breathing is so important, because when you're trying to hold something, if you're holding your breath or you're like overexerting yourself, then you can't hold the pose. And with strength building, how do you build strength? By holding the pose. So in back bends, you repeat the pose numerous times because you can't hold it for too long. And that would be an exception to the rule. But I'm talking warrior two, triangle, Prasarita Padottanasana, all of those poses, you can hold them for a good amount of time. All right. And then adequate rest, I'm just going to re-emphasize that. That is something that, if you are pumped up with adrenaline, especially when you're teaching, you may not give people an adequate rest. So let me recommend that you focus on your own breath and that you notice, how people are feeling by observing them instead of just noticing how you're feeling in that moment. What is hard with soft instructions? A hard instruction is press the inner upper thighs away from each other, come lower, deeper, press into your heels, lift your chest. And then a soft instruction is feel the strength you have within you. Lift and open through your chest. Notice how your breath flows more freely. So if all you do is hammer them over and over and over again with hard instructions, they're going to become agitated. And then typically that's when people come out of their poses. But if you learn this art of actually balancing, hey, I'm going to ask you to do something that is challenging, but I'm also going to back off and support you as well. That's what you're using your words for, to help them to get the most benefit out of these poses. And that is something that I'm really excited for y'all to work on. It is truly an art. All right. The next section is called deep work. This is the part of the class where the more complicated poses come in. This is what you've been working towards. So when you're doing what I'll call simple sequencing, you are setting up your entire sequence around 1 to maybe 3 different poses that are difficult to do. And of course, for beginners, something that's difficult is something like wheel, or possibly even bridge, or maybe a deeper forward fold like Paschimottanasana. So don't get carried away with what you think is a complicated pose. It's all relative to the level of the person, and we'll talk more about what a difficult pose is. You might spend an entire beginner level class working your way up to camel. Whereas, when you're more advanced, you're just like, are you kidding me? I use camel to warm up. But, people have a different level of ability, especially when they first begin. Okay, but we've been working towards this the entire time, and now it's time to do it. So emphasize the work that's been done prior to this point to reassure the students that they are ready. And then you get 2 to 3 challenging or difficult poses. That's plenty. And help those who are having difficulty or who have lost their focus. This part of the class is where most people have had it. They got here, and then it's going to require more of them, and you need to help them to stay present and to be interested and also confident that they can do this. And then the very last part is the restorative part, where these poses counterbalance all the work that you've done in your deep work. So you back your way out of what you just got into. So let's just say you were working into wheel, and now you're going to progressively work your way away from a back bend and into a forward bend, or I prefer with that to work your way into a twist. And so both are appropriate, and then of course always at the end you do a twist to realign the spine regardless. So counterbalance the stuff that you did in the deep work, and then I just gave you that example. All right, so that is a simple class, and that's how it's done. That's how you set it up. So that's the framework of every class. Now I'm going to get into 4-point system sequencing, and this gets fun. So 4-point system sequencing, these are the 4 points: physical, mental, emotional, philosophical. These 4 points make up every pose, every life experience, each sequence, and each individual. Where you place the pose in the sequence has everything to do with what experience and slice of life you are focused on for that sequence. Bringing the experiences from the outside world to the mat and translating the life lessons we encounter through the poses. Filtering the lessons through the intricacies of our inside world to realize the true self. Focusing with perfect discipline on one experience at a time to learn the truth about ourselves. We practice each and every time with the awareness of understanding that which is reality, that which is not, and with practice learning the difference between the two. Consciously directing our attention and focus in a direction that benefits us personally and in turn benefits everyone and everything else in the universe. Designing each sequence to achieve exactly what we are looking for and learning through what we share. So that is the definition of 4-point system sequencing. Now I'm going to take you to the example and reality of using 4-point system sequencing in a sequence that I did a long time ago called Ice Cream Sunday. And it's about happiness in daily life, because although I love defining things as far as, okay, this is what something is, so I can understand it better, I'm definitely more of, let me see how it applies to real life. And so this is how. This sequence has, a good amount of poses in it. It's designed for a 90-minute class. And I'll teach you at some point how to take any sequence and make it 45 minutes, 60 minutes, 75 minutes, or 90 minutes, all the way up to 2 hours. Okay, so you'll be able to adjust what you're doing. And I just need to say this, you always want to go err on the side of having more than less. Okay, so that you have things that you can throw away if you need to. All right, so active child's pose, 8 breaths, and the 4 points that we'll focus on here, these are ones I've chosen. You can choose your own. When you design your sequence, you decide what you're going to focus on, but let me give you some information about it's the beginning of the class, and you need to set them up so that they are physically aware, and then you need to introduce emotional and mental aspects of what's going on there for them. And so typically what I do, rather than tell them how they're doing, is I set them up and then introduce some questions of, how are you doing? And emphasizing, this is the time to start noticing, how are you doing? When you get into the cat-cows, you focus on the physical. And then down dog to Prasarita Padottanasana, this is where we're going to focus mentally. Now, you could focus on any one of the 4 points or combination of the 4 points at any time during your sequence. But what you want to make sure of is that you don't overwhelm people. So you'll notice that with the cat-cows, I made the choice, I'm just going to focus physical here. Then with this next part, I'm going to focus just mental. I'm introducing them to these 4 aspects of themselves. Then step back to Chaturanga, lower for Bhujangasana. I'm going to focus physically there, especially because this is their first Chaturanga. And so people can focus physically the easiest. And then emotional, mental, and philosophical start to get more challenging as far as the easiness of it. So then down dog to Prasarita again. Now I'm going to add in, okay, let's add in a little physical and mental. Step back to Chaturanga, lower to Bhujangasana. So now second time that we're doing this, and I'm going to focus physical again. I like to give people a break. If I introduce something mentally, I like to give them a moment to reconnect physically. It's early in the class. Then we're going to high step up to Uttanasana, mental and emotional in this forward fold. It's a pretty simple pose. Not that it's easy to do, but this gives a great opportunity to focus inward and to really notice how you're feeling, especially now that you've done a few things. And now into sun salutations. Well, sun sals are all of it, because in this sequence I have 15 sun salutation A's. So you've got room to add in physical, mental, emotional, but no, I haven't added philosophical yet. Sun sals move quickly, and there's not really a time within the sun salutations to philosophize. So they can offer physical, mental, and emotional. I highly recommend including all 3 of those points in the sun A's. In the sun B's, we start doing some variations, and I'm going to introduce philosophical because I bought myself some time. So I can have somebody come up, for example, into a humble warrior, and when they're holding the humble warrior, you can philosophize. which is so, so amazing. And at this point in the class, they're ready. They want it because it's like, okay, I'm breathing. I can feel my body. I'm focused now. I want to be here. Even if they're having a hard day, they're emotionally tuning in. And then you slam down some of that philosophical wisdom and they're just like, awesome. That is what just created the experience for this class. And so we are basically 35 minutes in, and you got them for another hour, give or take, right? It's like perfect. And then after that, we're going to do some balancing poses here. Actually, several. So, so physical, mental, emotional, reconnect, let them ground, and keep it going with the mental and emotional. And then there's a demo. And what's interesting is people always focus when they do something like dancer's pose into eagle. They're like physically describing it. But this is about happiness in daily life. And physically, that's not where you feel the happiness. So you get some emotional, philosophical stuff going on there, and people are going to be able to hold these poses for a long time. And you can, test the water and play with what you feel like works. Try some different things. And then down dog to Bhadrasana, physical and philosophical. There's a good combo. Then down dog to head to ankle to Kundalini, physical and emotional, because also hip opener and arm balance. So you need both of those things. Walk up to Sirsasana 2, physical and mental. So Sirsasana 2, right, headstand 2, tripod headstand, that is definitely something that you need mental clarity when you do that. And it's not that hard physically, but you need to know where your body is for sure. Wheel 3 times. Do all of it. Here come in all 4 points. And by the way, now we're in the deep work. Here we go. So we've got physical, emotional, mental, philosophical. After that, they need to rest. And then we've got a happy baby. And we're going to roll up and go into Karmasana, which is the tortoise. And then we roll back and we do the happy baby. And we're restoring. And after that, supine twist, ground them again with the physical. Let them just be with everything they've already created within themselves during this class and ground them with this physical focus so that as they go into Shavasana, they feel balanced and secure. So that is how I decided to break down the ice cream sundae sequence. And now what I want you all to do, and I'm sending this to everyone, is I want you to take this and do with it what you want to. And have fun thinking about it and, trying different things. Feel it in your own body as you bring yourself through the class. All right. Namaste.